Dear students, welcome to our course Governance and Ethics. And I'm sure you all be pretty excited about learning this course. And in this introductory session, I'm going to focus on the overview part of this course and what will be the learning outcomes from this course, right? And some of the students might be having a knowledge about the term corporate governance, some might not be, so you don't need to worry at all. I'm going to just start with the basic of what is corporate governance, what is the definition. Is that just a single definition for corporate governance, or do we have multiple definitions? If I say it's just a single definition, what are the implications for organizations in designing and implementing, managing the governing systems? And if it is multifaceted, where we should start? So there is no single definition. Why? Because different organizations, different contexts, different countries, different cultures, so different regulations. So there is a narrow view and there is a broad view as well. So let's first start with a narrow view. And this is restricted to a relationship between an organization, specifically a company, a corporation, and its shareholders. This has its roots in what we can refer as the traditional financial paradigm. We link that to agency theory. So this is something where the governance, the regulations all have started in 1992 in United Kingdom, where the Cadbury report was published. Why they have published this report? Followed by the number of collapses and which companies are directed and controlled. So in such case, they have adopted this view of corporate governance with the definition of corporate governance. So after so many companies have gone through so many issues, they have come out with this report where they have mentioned all the governance regulations and things. And now, in the broader view, this includes not just shareholders, but a whole range of stakeholders. So now, if I say stakeholders, the term stakeholders includes customers, suppliers, lenders, people, this banks, bondholders, that increases the local community as well, and of course employees. So these are all the elements of stakeholders. So this is something where in this broader view, which is much more inclusive, so embracing the stakeholder theory, where in the first thing where we have narrowed down and linked with the agency theory, now this has been linked to the stakeholder theory. And then it has also driven to the attributes of accountability and corporate social responsibility. So now we have both the broader view and the narrow view. And this creates a spectrum which tells about the corporate governance and how you have to be accountable to your shareholder. So now whatever I have discussed, no, it revolves around the theme of accountability. And then in the broader view, it includes, and now in the broader view, it includes uh, the environment, that legacy that led to the future generations. So here we are espousing the idea of corporate governance. In what way we are managing, mitigating, preventing, reconciling the tensions, the issues pertaining to the providers of finance, or shareholders and stakeholders. So, in any society for that matter, okay, individuals or companies, they exist in an organized way. They make decisions about the work that needs to be done and how it is done. So, you need to maintain a particular order and sustainability of work that needs to be done and how it is done. So, to maintain that order, to maintain certain things, so individuals and companies' decisions has to be ethical, and of course, it has to be socially responsible. For companies, ethical decisions are assured by the way of corporate governance policies and practices. So, in the latest developments, how the board and the officials or the CG professionals, I mean corporate governance professionals like accountants, they play a very key role in this. I shall also want to touch on the point of corporate social responsibility, which is a thriving area of companies' practice. There are many perspectives of corporate governance in the most pragmatic and succinct definitions were put forth by several reports. But where in the earlier era, in 1910, 19, before 1910 and all, corporate governance was defined by which companies are directed and controlled. Companies, they refer more specifically to limited liability companies. But what does corporate governance exactly do? Who are involved? So the answers require an elaborate definition. So governance, it's a collection of laws, rules, regulations you put together for the companies. And it also highlights that companies are accountable to those who invest resources in companies. Who are those parties who invest resources? So, what are the resources concerned? Resources can be either money or in any kind of parties who invest resources. Shareholders, they are definitely one party who invest share capital in the companies. Other parties may include banks and suppliers who respectively provide loans or inventories to companies for their business operations. So employees dedicate their time and expertise for the achievement of companies' goals. So government, what they provide a physical and legal infrastructure so that companies can operate in an orderly society. So in return for their investments, company must observe the interest of each other parties. So all these interests may of course vary. We treat all these and other parties collectively as stakeholders. And one of the contemporary thoughts for advocating corporate governance is exactly to ensure that companies will serve their stakeholders' interest as whole of their operations. But yet with various stakeholders in place and the interests to be served, there are often conflicts of stakeholder interest, which corporate governance has to resolve. So it is impossible to make everyone happy, right? So, therefore, corporate governance in practice is often more for assurance of ethical decisions made by the board while mitigating the conflicts of interest, the impact of companies' actions, favorable or unfavorable, will then fall unevenly on different stakeholders. So, from past experiences and ethical company behaviors contemplated under poor corporate governance. So, that includes looting, which can be misappropriation of clients' money by the professionals, or embezzlement of the company's money by executives, insider trading by directors and senior executives are also unethical. Such could have been stopped if the committing parties were ethical and controlled effectively by companies' policies. Other not strictly illegal but definitely unethical behaviors that includes excessive risk taking by the board's decisions, excessive remunerations approved by the board of directors and executives, unsuccessful and non-performing executives given a golden handshake with huge severance money. So it is that the standard of ethical decisions by the board that is of concern in corporate governance. So it obviously refers to the rules, practices, and procedures that direct how the corporation is managed and controlled. It outlines the distribution of rights and the responsibilities among different groups in the corporation, such like board of directors, managers. So good corporate governance, it makes the business run more efficiently. It creates value for the shareholders. So if individuals or institution, right, they hold the stocks of a company, they are called the company shareholder or stockholder. So let me give you like this. Here institutions, they include companies, mutual funds, pension funds, endowment funds, insurance companies are there. So normally when they buy and sell large blocks of stocks, they are more powerful than the small shareholder of a company. See, if a shareholder controls more than 50% of a company's outstanding shares, then you call him as what? He holds the majority, right? So you call him as majority shareholder. And in most cases, no, majority shareholders are companies' founders or descendants of companies' founders. I'll give you one example. We all know who's the founder of Facebook? Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark controls more than 50% of all voting shares in Facebook. So by controlling more than half of companies' voting shares, he has an effective control uh, in important decisions, especially with important operational decisions, and it can't be outstated by the board. So here the stock holding matters. If the stock holding is less than 50% of the company stock, then you come under minority. So for most of the outside investors, they are minority shareholders. And let's look at the rights of shareholders. Here their rights are mainly two parts. The first one is voting rights. So as shareholders know, they have shareholders or owners in a company, they can vote for some important corporate issues like electing the directors, decisions with regard to mergers and acquisitions. And besides voting, they are entitled to enjoy the benefits of the business success. So the benefits can come in the form of dividend. So these are all the major rights a shareholder can benefit. So we can have the right as a shareholder. We can tell that they can easily have the voting rights as well as the cash flow rights. And now there might be a question in your mind: who is that highest governing body of a corporation is the board of directors. Okay, and the directors are elected by the shareholders, usually once in a year at the annual shareholders meeting, to represent the best interest of shareholders. So here it happens. So the structure and the power of a board is determined by an organization's article of incorporation. So the number of board members and how the board works. So an inside director, a director who has a stake in the corporation. Some examples let me give you, like CEO, COO, CFO, or major shareholders, representatives of employee. So they come under the category of inside director, the director who has a stake in the corporation. Outside directors are called as independent directors. From the name, you can tell that they are not stakeholders in the company. Outside directors are required for big public companies because people believe that they'll bring independent voice to the board. So, outside directors are often leaders of other organizations. So, good corporate governance, it requires a balance between inside directors and outside directors. Insiders know the company very well, but what is the problem here? Their decisions may reflect their personal interests. Outsiders can provide what? Unbiased perspectives, isn't it? But they may not have a deep knowledge about the company. For a traditional board, there are at least four basic committees. Please make a note of the points I am telling here. Four basic committees. First is the executive committee. Second is the audit committee. Third, compensation committee. And the fourth one is nominating committee. So for most of the companies, they have more committees than they depend on the needs of the boards and special consideration. So let's just talk about the four committees. Let me start with the executive committee. So this committee meets more often and they set the priorities for the whole board. And the members of audit committee, they are independent outside the directors. They oversee their company's internal control, financial reporting, objectives, and everything. And then the compensation committee, um, they determine the pay packages for the top executives. And here we have one more committee, which is nominating committee. They are the people who are responsible for appointing new board members, or nominating, especially not appointing, nominating new board members. So the major responsibilities of the board of directors, we can easily tell their main duty is to select and appoint the senior executives and to supervise their performance. And they also set the major policies of the company, like how much dividend to pay to the shareholders, and CEO's compensation, approving annual budget. So these are all the responsibilities of board of directors. And the board appoints the CEO. As you all know, CEO is the senior executive within the corporation. So he or she is responsible for managing the corporation and making the decision. And he or she reports to the board of directors for the performance of corporation. And in most cases, CEO is also the member of board of directors. CEO works with top executive. So company, it has more other top executives like chief technology officer, chief security officer, chief marketing. And here we have chief medical officers as well. You can easily see this position in hospital. But here I want to talk more about CFO, Chief Financial Officer, who is in charge of financial planning of a company. And CFO is the most important financial voice of the corporation. He or she explains the earning results and forecasts everything. So they report to the CEO and the board. They work closely with other top executives to shape the company strategies. See, Chief Marketing Officer is there, no? He comes up with some great ideas of digital marketing campaigning, but CFO has to make sure that the ideas are financially feasible and that we have enough financial resources to devote to a marketing campaign like this. So here we are in a position where the CFO supervises the financial unit and the work of the treasurer and the controller. So this much of credibility and accountability the chief financial officer is having. So, as a whole, if you see, corporate governance is just like how you run a country or a region. If you have if you have a very clear goal, a very clear structure, specify the duties and responsibilities, and then the goal can be easily achieved.